I'm sorry. I must have misheard you. I thought you said it was over 1,000 for that graphics card. There's no doubt that Nvidia caused quite a stir when it released its series of RTX graphics cards at substantially increased prices. For us flight simmers that are still using platforms that are predominantly CPU bound, the big question obviously is it worth it? Well, today we're going to be doing tests with prepared version 4.5 and the 2080 Ti. Welcome to the SimHanger for all things flight sim related. And welcome to part 2 in our 3-part series testing out the RTX 2080 Ti in flight simulation. In part 1, we had a look at the performance in Xplane 11.3, and today we're going to be testing out prepared version 4.5. And in part 3, we're going to be comparing the results side by side. Don't forget to subscribe and tap the bell for future notifications. Thank you. The card we're using today is from EVGA. It's selling for about 1,000 and it's their black edition. To test our simulator today, we're going to be using it in 2 different ORBX sceneries. First, a light to medium impact test, Monument Valley, and then the real stress test, Great Britain South. Here are the computer specifications that we'll be using today, and the weather is provided by Active Sky for prepared version 4 from Hi-Fi Simulations. To measure our clock speed and other aspects, we're going to be using MSI's fantastic Afterburner. This allows us to measure the GPU and CPU usage by core, as well as RAM and frame rates. I'll leave links in the notes below. We're going to be using a 32-inch LG monitor running at 2K, but we'll be recording in 1080p and it's FreeSync compatible. Following the January Nvidia driver update, FreeSync monitors can now run in G-Sync compatibility mode. I did a video on that, and again I'll leave links in the notes below. Today and for most of our tests we're going to be using the Piper Arrow 3 from Just Flight. The Piper Arrow 3 is a popular 4-seater single engine with retractable tricycle gear and a constant speed prop, making it ideal for both touring and instrument training. It's one of my favorites, especially for VFR flight, and has a ceiling of circa 15,000 feet. Okay, with that all out the way, let's get started. Monument Valley lies on the Nevada-Utah border and is part of the Colorado Plateau. It's characterized by the huge sandstone buttes rising up to 1,000 feet or 300 meters above the valley floor, which itself is at an altitude of between 5,000 and 6,000 feet. Monument Valley lies in the territory of the Navajo Nation. We're on the runway, Monument Valley, runway 34. And to kick off, let's have a look at the recommended settings for this by ORBX. Mesh resolution at 5, texture at 7, and scenery complexity extremely dense. Let's now go and review the settings in Prepared. FXAA is off. Anti-aliasing is 8 times SSAA, which is the highest, androscopic times 8, and Ultra 4096. Looking at our world settings, level of detail is Ultra, tessellation Ultra, mesh and texture as recommended, scenery complexity extremely dense. We have HDR lighting and dynamic lighting enabled. Shadow quality is at medium. All traffic is set at 10%, and ORBX recommend between 10 and 15% is maximum. And realism, everything set to full realism. Let's see how these settings work for us. And afterburner on, and the frame rate's very high, 160 frames per second. Feeling fairly smooth. I hope that's coming out on the video. I am having some problems with the video recording. I'm using a beta version of DaVinci Resolve, but what I'm seeing is fairly smooth. No major problems, perhaps a slight micro pause here and there. External view and the frame rate's picked up, which we would expect. Again, very smooth, very fluid. Scenery looks good. Good detail. I'm just going to go back to the settings and make a few adjustments. Let's turn the anthroposcopic up and see if that has any impact on the frame rates. Nope, no impact at all. All looking pretty static. I'm going to go to 4 times SSAA as I'm currently running at the highest resolution. Slight pickup maybe in frame rates, but nothing significant. I'm gonna go down to 2048 resolution. It looks pretty much the same. No real change in frame rates for me. Everything's pretty clear, readable. Let's just check that again. Frame rates have remained pretty static. I'm going to go back to 2048 by 2048 as I can't visually see any difference, and there's little point in overtaxing the GPU or CPU when there's no need to. Just have a look at the world settings. Just going to turn the level of detail up to full. Slight decrease in frame rates, but nothing significant. Frame rates starting to settle. Yes, there's been a slight decrease. That's good enough to start. Let's give it a go at these settings. Feeling very fluid, silky smooth. Rolling down the runway. Just coming up and rotate. And up we go. We're not going to climb very high. Just going to get above the ground. Let's get the gears up. There we go. Flaps are up. And we're just going to get the autopilot on. Fix the heading. And settle down at cruise. Frame rate is, I'm actually quite amazed that it's this high. We're running between 180 and 210 frames per second. The scenery is not too taxing. I'm now going to shut down Active Sky as it overrides Prepared's weather, and then use Prepared to feed in different weather so we can see how it performs. And I think we'll start off with building storms and see how we do there. A drop of about 25 frames, 25 to 30 frames. Let's go to fogged in. Now we're seeing quite a drop. Just let the frame stabilize. Still feels smooth in the cockpit. Still very fluid. External views fairly high. Let's go to grey and rainy. Not really much of a difference. External views, frame rates remain high. No real problems for prepared at this stage. Let's go to thunderstorms. And in fact the frame rates picked up from foggy, which is not really surprising, to be honest. We're back to clear skies, and let's now go and feed in some different times of the day. Let's go to dusk. Not a significant difference there in frames. It seems to handle that fairly well. Lights of the airport also visible in the distance. Just turning towards them now. Let's feed in some weather on top of dusk, building storms. There has been a drop in frames, but not significant, and remaining above 100. Let's go to night. So it's building storms, night flying. Frames have remained pretty stable and still remain above 100, so the RTX doing a really good job at the moment. Let's try and fogged in and night. And we have seen a drop in frames. The one thing to note that's quite important and emphasizes how CPU bound prepared is. If you look at the different cores, you'll see CPU 1 running almost constantly at between 98 and 100%. The other cores not really being taxed. And this is the biggest single limitation in terms of prepared, and most flight simulators, to be fair. Okay, let's go and turn everything up to the max. 4096 enteroscopic times 16, 8 times SSAA. Mesh resolution all the way up. Autogen, draw distance and density all the way up. Building density and water detail all the way up. And let's see how we do. Frame rates have remained respectable and perfectly flyable. There's no juddering, there's no tearing that I can see. Let's go and feed in a bit of weather. I should mention I'm using Hotfix 1 for prepared version 4.5. Let's go to grey and rainy and see how we do. Not a big negative impact. Certainly has dropped the frame rate, but not significantly so. Remember, all the settings are all the way up. And it would be fair to say that the combination of the optimized scenery from ORBX for Monument Valley and the RTX 2080Ti means that this is no real challenge. Great performance all round. London City Airport is situated close to the centre of the city itself and is well known for its steep descent on final for both ends of its single runway 2709. With 5 million passengers through its doors for both business and commercial, the 4,900-foot runway can take the smaller Airbuses. We're on the runway 27 in the Piper. Let's have a look at ORBX's recommended settings for ORBX True Earth, Great Britain, and my settings in Prepared. My settings are nowhere near the maximum settings as it brings my simulator to its knees. So to start off with, we've got 4x SSAA, anthroposcopic by 4, and resolution 2048 high. I've turned down the level of detail radius, scenery complexity, and the draw distance to make it more manageable for the flight simulation. HDR dynamic lighting is enabled, and again I've turned down the traffic. London City and JFK, New York, are two scenery areas well known for bringing simulators to their knees. Let's just get the afterburner on, and we're seeing we've got mid-50s. There is a little bit of judder and tearing, but I think that's good enough to start. Let's go flying. We can see that CPU 1 is running at 100%, and so are some of the other cores at various times, and the scenery is surging. By surging, I'm getting that change in motion, fast and slow, fast and slow. This is not an immersive experience for me. So after a considerable amount of time experimenting with the various settings, these are the prepared settings that give me the fluid movement. 4x MSAA, anthroposcopic times 8, and I've had to turn down the level of detail and scenery complexity as well as draw distance in order to give me a more immersive and fluid experience. The visuals still look very good, but I would have been happier being able to have more complexity to the scenery and a greater draw distance. I've left HDR and dynamic lighting on. In terms of frame rates, I am getting from the lower 50s to the 70 mark. It's fairly fluid and smooth. That surging is no longer there. And now we can enjoy the scenery and give it a test with various weather and lighting parameters. So to start, let's go and put in some weather, building storms, and not much of a difference in terms of frame rates. Again, CPU 1 being choked, but the graphics card not really working too hard at all. Let's try fogged in. Same frame rates, 12 megs of RAM being used. Let's try grey and rainy. GPU and CPU temperatures are good. Again, frame rates fairly stable. Visuals look good. Of course, Prepared has its origins way back in the Microsoft FSX days, and is still CPU bound predominantly and not taking advantage of the GPU's facilities. Let's see how we do in storms. Again, frame rate has remained fairly stable with the settings that I've got, which is after all the main objective. And if I can fly over central London with these settings, I can fly just about anywhere. Now feeding in dusk and stormy weather. Frame rates have remained fairly stable, quite turbulent. Sick bags are available on request. Weather now set to broken, and keeping an eye on the CPU temperature as it's starting to creep upwards as it's working hard. And let's go and try fly at night. Just for reference, I am using ORBX's global lights. Frame rates have remained fairly static. Does look good. I am occasionally getting a little bit of micro pausing, but nothing significant. So let's now go and feed in some different weather scenarios, and we'll start off with fogged in and at night. Again, frame rates pretty much the same, no major change. Now fogged in during the day. The graphics card at 1875, that's maximum boost for the EVGA Black Edition. It's not overclocked. Let's go back to the active sky weather theme that we had. And frame rates very much the same, maybe slightly higher, nothing of any note. The GPU memory, 5.5 megs of 11 megs that's available to it, and the RAM usage is about 12 megabytes. CPU 1 remains choked. Let's have a change of scenery now, and we're in the Baron 5.5 from Milvez, and we're flying over Southampton. Frame rates mid-50s. No major change between day and night flying. Let's now feed in a bit of weather, building storms over Southampton, and we're at dusk. Slight drop in frame rates, but nothing significant. Grey and rainy. Frame rates holding up okay. The settings for the Milvez Baron 5.5 are exactly the same as I had for the Piper. And now stormy weather. I must say, being away from central London, I had expected a slightly bigger uplift in frame rate than what I'm seeing, but it's smooth and will allow an immersive flight, no problems at all. It feels good. And now in the Saab 340S from Coronado and landing at Southampton. Well, hopefully landing at Southampton. Frame rates holding up. We're down. Don't forget to subscribe and tap the bell for future notifications. Thank you. Well, some interesting and somewhat unexpected results. Certainly a tale of two very different halves in terms of performance between Monument Valley and True Earth Great Britain South. Coming up next in the third and final part of our series, where we put the 2080 Ti to test in flight simulation, will be a direct comparison of performance between Prepared and Xplane. I look forward to you joining me then, and bye for now.